With all these anti-crypto SEC complaints, it's easy to forget that a new day will dawn in this regulatory desert, and there will be light for those who prepared for this type of future. Cardano was made for what comes next, but some of our competitors probably were not. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the digital asset market structure discussion draft being co-sponsored by Representatives McHenry, Chair of the House Financial Services Committee, and Representative Thompson, Chair of the House Agriculture Committee, and what its passage into law might do to the crypto ecosystem. If you feel like this regulatory desert landscape doesn't actually look all that foreboding, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Okay, guys, we've had a couple of days of bad crypto news. These last 2 days have involved SEC complaints filed against both Binance and Coinbase. These are not the greatest of days for crypto. There's been a lot of, I don't want to use the word darkness. Maybe that's a little too dramatic because it's not really like insurmountable darkness. But this hasn't been what we'd call positive news for crypto. I think we will triumph where it's important, where we should actually win. I think we'll win. There's some things going on in that Binance case that I think might be pretty difficult for crypto to win there. But I think we're going to win where we should win. I think we're going to triumph eventually on the issues that are important that we should win. But I also think there's a big ray of hope out there. I think we are definitely going to exit. At some point, we're going to exit this era of lack of regulatory clarity in crypto that makes all of our lives in crypto so difficult. It makes it extremely difficult to carry out legitimate crypto affairs. We're going to exit that era and we're going to go into an era of some level of regulatory clarity. The US government, through the legislative branch, is going to provide us with a crypto regulatory framework. Eventually, that's going to pass. We don't know when that's going to be. Is it going to be a year from November when we have the big elections? Maybe there will be a changing of some seats in the Senate that'll make it possible for, one side to do its thing and give us the clarity that we need so badly. Maybe it'll be then. Maybe somehow it might happen before then. Maybe it'll be after then. We don't really know. But we are going to exit this era where there is no regulatory clarity, and we're going to enter a new era when we have a well fleshed out regulatory framework to do things in crypto. And recently, there was a discussion draft circulated called the Digital Asset Market Structure Proposal. This is some proposed legislation. It's not really a bill yet. It's just a draft of a bill. They circulate around so that everybody can discuss it. It's a discussion draft, but there are some really good things in this discussion draft. It's not perfect. You'll find a lot of people in crypto complaining about this proposed bill, but in a lot of the cases, there's a reason they're complaining. It's because their ecosystem was not built for an era of regulatory clarity. I think in Cardano, the architects of Cardano sort of took a stab at certain elements of decentralization that would be sufficient for the era that I'm convinced we are going to enter, where there is a regulatory framework. I think they took a stab. They made some predictions about what types and levels, what thresholds of decentralization would be required in that era when crypto can finally go legit, because there's a framework that dictates what is legit in crypto. And I think they guessed right. I think they guessed correctly about what types and levels of decentralization would be required to do things legitly once regulation came in. And this discussion draft, it lays out a series of criteria that Cardano matches very, very well. But a lot of other blockchains, a lot of our very near peer competitors, they don't match those criteria in a lot of different ways. Okay, we're going to jump into the bill right now, but don't worry, it's not going to be boring. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make this not boring. But we're going to look at the bill because I think there's a few things, important things to understand here, because Cardano feels like it was tailor-made for this kind of regulatory environment, and I'll show you why. So a lot of the action in these types of proposed bills, hopefully this becomes a bill, is in the definitions of certain things. And this is one of those proposed bills where they decided to try to define decentralization. They have this definition, decentralized network. So it has a bunch of different criteria, and these are things that may have existed over certain time periods. The time periods that are most relevant are 12 months, the last 12 months, and the last 3 months. So we're going to have some things they want to be true over the last 12 months, and then some things over the last 3 months, and then one more last 12 months thing. So here we go. Part of the criteria is that during the previous 12 months, no person acting on the person's own, excluding any decentralized organization, had the unilateral authority, directly or indirectly, to control or materially alter the functionality or operation of the blockchain network. So in Cardano, what do we have? We have the founding entities, the CF, Emergo, and IOG, and they each have part of the keys, part of the total number of keys that are required to make changes to the blockchain. So that is not a single person. They're talking about sort of a legal person here. They're not saying like a human being. They're talking about a legal person that could be, like a corporation or something like that. But we don't have a single legal person in Cardano who can unilaterally make changes to the blockchain, the way the blockchain functions, the functionality or operation of the blockchain network. We don't have that in Cardano, so we pass. In my sort of cursory reading of this, it seems like Cardano would pass. But a lot of other blockchains, what do they have? They have a single lab entity. It's like Blank Labs. I'm not trying to call out any specific blockchains, but I think we all know there are a lot of blockchains out there, and there's like Blank Labs that runs that blockchain, and they're the only ones who can make changes to the protocol, and they hold all the keys. They don't pass this. They would not be a decentralized network under this provision. Cardano seems like it would pass. So there's more. They also say, let's see, where is it? They also say, during the previous 12-month period, neither any digital asset issuer nor any affiliated person, and we'll talk about what an affiliated person is in just a second, excluding, again, any decentralized organization, beneficially owned units of such digital asset that represented at any time 20% or more units of such digital asset. So this is sort of like as to any digital asset. They're saying it's not decentralized if one person owns more than 20%. If one person who is a digital asset issuer nor any affiliated person. And we also know that in Cardano, that's not the case because all the founding entities together didn't amount to 20%. So Cardano is already good there. But in a lot of other blockchains, you'll remember when these other blockchains started coming on the scene, almost every single one of them, the ones that we in Cardano have sort of like collectively grouped together as the VC chains, all of those VC chains, there are a lot of entities that own more than 20%. That's not going to work in the next sort of, regulatorily clear era we're going to enter, because I think they're going to have provisions that look a lot like this. They're not going to be cool with these blockchains where a couple entities own like 70% of the coins. That's not going to meet the definition of decentralization. And here they're not just saying ownership, they're also saying that they don't want anybody to have 20% control of the voting power that might be assigned to those digital assets. Then we come to some of the 3-month criteria. So they say in the last 3 months, they don't want any digital asset issuer to have contributed or implemented any IP or code or to have marketed the blockchain to the public. So this is one where Cardano, because we're still sort of in development, Cardano, you can make some different arguments on this because we've obviously got IOG that is contributing code. And, under some definitions of digital asset issuer, you could say that IOG, even though, I'm sure they would argue that like the CF was the issuer of the ADA tokens initially in the ICO. It's possible that some people would argue that IOG would fall under the definition of digital asset issuer, and certainly they're continuously contributing code. But that's going to come to an end at a certain point here, and we won't necessarily have the founding entities contributing IP and code on a continuous basis to the blockchain. I think we're going to get to a period where the different entities are going to be paid out by the treasury to continue development of Cardano, and it might not necessarily be any entity that falls under digital asset issuer definitions here. So I think Cardano, once we're kind of through the Voltaire era, I think it'll be easy for Cardano to also fit under this last 3 months definition. And certainly, we definitely have a lot of 3-month periods. 3-month periods go by where there haven't been any contributions of code to the protocol. So this is pretty easy for Cardano to fit under this definition. Then we have another 12-month criteria. During the previous 12-month period, all issuances of units of the digital asset through the programmatic functioning of the blockchain network were end user distributions. So here they're talking about things like block rewards, like our staking rewards in Cardano. They want all of those to be going to end users. They don't want a situation where, a issuer, one of the issuers or the promoters or the centralized entities behind the blockchain are still getting a bunch of the issuances through the programmatic functioning of the blockchain network. They want all those issuances going to end users. So I know you're thinking, hey, wait a second, both IOG and Emergo seem to be involved in staking and they're getting those staking rewards. Do they not count as end users? Is that going to disqualify us because IOG and Emergo are involved in staking? So we need to look at this definition of end user distribution. They say end user distribution is one that does not involve an exchange of more than a nominal value of cash, property, or other assets. So like not a sale for money or something like that. So we're good there. Is distributed in a broad, non-discretionary manner based on conditions capable of being satisfied by any participant in the blockchain network, including as incentive-based rewards to users of the digital asset or any blockchain network to which the digital asset relates. So that could be like, like some kind of an airdrop or something, maybe. Or for activities directly related to the operation of the blockchain network, such as mining, validating, staking, or other activities directly tied to the operation of the blockchain network. So Cardano staking, still good, and relates to a blockchain network that is a functional network and for which the information described in 203 has been certified and made publicly available. Section 203 we'll look at in just a second. That's just the disclosure section. So in order for us to be good here, we just have to make sure that Cardano is making the proper disclosures. So actually, it looks like we'd be okay on that front. So Cardano, as near as I can tell, and I haven't, super thoroughly gone through every single word in this entire proposed bill, but it kind of looks to me, based on my, sort of cursory inspection today, it kind of looks to me like Cardano is already a decentralized network under this proposed bill. So the next thing you notice down here, sort of throughout this, there were references to functional network. This is sort of the other piece we need to look at, the definition of functional network. So later on, we're going to talk about why we're talking about these definitions, but it's going to be very important that a network is a decentralized network and also a functional network. So this functional network piece is that the network allows network participants to use such digital asset for transmission and storage of value on the blockchain network. Cardano does that. The participation in an application running on the blockchain network. We definitely have mini dApps, so we do that. The participation in governance of the blockchain network. We do that. And the digital asset. So, or at least we'll do that under Voltaire, but we kind of already do that in Catalyst. The digital asset does not confer. I guess I should even say can't kind of. We definitely do that. There is governance because we divvy up, capital from the treasury. That is governance of the blockchain network. Finally, the digital asset does not confer any express contractual rights between the holder and the digital asset issuer. I would say we're good on that. So it looks like in Cardano, we have both a decentralized network and a functional network according to this proposed bill. And for the reasons, especially under decentralized network, we talked about, I don't think a lot of our near peers, a lot of these VC coins, they're just not going to be able to hit any of those decentralization metrics. They've got way too many people holding over at least or greater than 20% of the assets. And they have a lot of lab entities that are capable of unilaterally doing things to the protocol. So I think Cardano passes this decentralization and functional network these criteria pretty well. Earlier, when we were covering the definition of a decentralized network, I failed to mention this little piece, which is also important. They don't want any legal person, to have the unilateral authority to restrict or prohibit any person who is not a related person or an affiliated person, we'll talk about both those definitions later, from using, earning, or transmitting the digital asset, deploying software that uses or integrates with the blockchain network, participates in on-chain governance decisions with respect to the blockchain network, or operating a node, validator, or other form of computational infrastructure with respect to the blockchain network. So I think we could all name a lot of different blockchains where you can have this kind of censorship. They're basically saying, we don't want any legal person acting on their own to be able to engage in censorship of anybody from doing any of these things. And there are various ways in which different legal persons running these various VC chain blockchains could do a lot of these things. That would also disqualify those blockchains from matching this definition of a decentralized network. Okay, so those were the big network definitions. Now let's talk about assets, because what we really want to know is what's going to be a security and what's not. So the first big definition is going to be restricted digital asset. These will be securities. I'll show you why in just a second. But to understand this definition, you need to understand the definitions of these two terms, affiliated person and related person. So if we go back here a little bit, related person is 33. This is a founder, promoter, employee, consultant, advisor, or person serving in a similar capacity, someone who's served in one of those capacities in the last 6 months, or any equity holder or other security holder of whoever issued the digital asset. That's what a related person is. Affiliated person is back here in definition 20. Sorry, we have to scroll a bit. Affiliated person would be a person that directly or indirectly is controlled by or controls or is under common control with the issuer. That's with respect to an asset. We've also got, that's with respect to the digital asset issuer. It could also be a person that fit any of those definitions in the last 3 months. With respect to the actual asset, a affiliated person would be a person that owns 5% or more of the units of that asset, or did so in the last three-month period. So that's what an affiliated person or a related person is. And we need those definitions to understand the definition we're really after here, which is in section 34, restricted digital assets. So these will be your securities. This is a digital asset that is purchased directly from the issuer or an affiliated person in a private offering. A digital asset that is distributed to a digital asset issuer, a related person, or an affiliated person in an end user distribution. We already talked about the definition of an end user distribution, or is distributed to any other person through a transaction that is not an end user distribution. So if it's distributed to somebody and doesn't fit the definition of end user distribution, it's going to be a restricted digital asset, which is going to mean securities for reasons I'm going to show you. If it's distributed to the issuer, a related person, or an affiliated person in an end user distribution, then it's going to be a security. If it's purchased directly from the digital asset issuer or an affiliated person in a private offering, then it's going to be a restricted digital asset, which is going to be a security in most cases. So they're basically saying, hey, if you're an insider, if you bought it from an insider in a private offering, or if it was distributed to you in some weird way that doesn't fit that end user distribution, it's going to end up being a restricted digital asset, which is going to be a security. So we also have an alternative to it being a restricted digital asset, which is a security, and that's a digital commodity. And that's going to be down here in section 52, in definition 52, in this, in this other section. Let me scroll to it right up here. Here we go, 54. So sorry, 52. Digital commodity. So a digital commodity is going to be issued to someone who is not the digital asset issuer, a related person, or an affiliated person, and it's going to be distributed through an end user distribution. A digital asset that is held by any person other than the issuer, or related person, or an affiliated person. It could also be a digital asset that is issued to someone other than the issuer, a related person, or affiliated person after the network to which the asset relates is a functional network and it's certified to be a decentralized network under Section 204. And Section 204 is just going to be the section where they talk about how you certify it as meeting that definition for decentralized network we talked about. So this is important. They're saying, hey, it's not a security, it's a digital commodity if it was issued to somebody other than the issuer or the insiders related to that issuer in an end user distribution, or it's related to, or it's issued to somebody who again is not the issuer or another insider, and the network is already a functional network and a decentralized network. So, or they say it could be a unit of the digital asset that is held by a related person or an affiliated person, as long as the blockchain is a functional network and it's certified to be a decentralized network. So you've got this great get out of jail free card in some cases, to some extent. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say it's a get out of jail free card, but I should say you end up in this other category of commodity, digital commodity assets, largely if it's a functional network and it's already been certified to be a decentralized network. So those are going to be very pivotal definitions. Okay, now we've run through all the definitions. Now let's go to some of the working provisions of this discussion draft. So starting with Section 201. So Section 201 is exempted transactions in digital assets. This establishes an exemption. So over here, we're in the summary because I don't want to take you through all of the language of the bill. This is actually the summary that's available on the same website. So Section 201 is an exemption from the securities laws for a digital asset issuer's sale of digital assets. So now we're talking about the asset issuer selling the digital asset. And there's an exemption from the securities laws if it meets the following conditions. The issuer's total sales of the digital asset over the prior 12 months does not exceed $75 million. So $75 million limit. A non-accredited investor's purchases of the digital asset from the issuer of the prior 12 months are less than the greater of 5% of the purchaser's annual income or 5% of their net worth. So this is, we also have an accredited investor standard here, but it's not just like a blanket forbidding of non-accredited investors. If you're a non-accredited investor here, you could still buy less than 5% of your annual income or less than 5% of your net worth, whichever one is more. I would love to see them get rid of the accredited investor standard totally, but this is way better than what we have currently. So number 3 is the purchaser does not own more than 10% of the units of the digital asset after the completion of the transaction. So they don't want anybody to be able to buy more than 10% of the entire float of the digital asset. I think that's great for decentralization. And the transaction does not involve equity or debt securities. They don't want people to use this as a loophole to buy equity securities and say they're not securities because they're digital assets. They basically don't want people to use crypto as a workaround here. So that's great. That'll actually work. I think that would work great for issuances. You know, people who want to do giant offerings over 75 million, those EOS style $4 billion offerings or whatever it is, they won't like this. But I think actually for a lot of project issuances, this would work. So Cardano's ICO happened in Asia a long time ago. So obviously this wouldn't necessarily apply there. This is this would be, this would be a concern for projects going forward who want to do issuances. So then we've got Section 202. So Section 202 sets out the conditions under which certain persons are permitted to engage in restricted digital asset transactions and digital commodity transactions. So remember, the first one is going to be securities, and the second one is going to be not securities. So generally, restricted digital assets are permitted to trade on an alternative trading system under the supervision of the SEC. So if you fall into this restricted digital asset transaction category, this restricted digital asset category, you fall under the SEC. Obviously, no one is going to want to be there. They're going to want to be digital commodity transactions, because digital commodity transactions are permitted to trade on a digital commodity exchange under the supervision of the CFTC. Coinbase and everybody, they're going to want to be this one if this bill were to ever pass. They're going to want to be digital commodity exchanges and be under the CFTC for sure. So 203, we referenced this earlier. This is just going to be a disclosure requirement, a new disclosure regime to be completed by a digital asset issuer, affiliated person, related person, or other appropriate entity. The information required to be disclosed is focused on the nature of the risks surrounding digital assets, including source code, project economics, development plan, related and affiliated persons, and other risk factors. We expect this, and it's actually a good idea. We actually need this. So certification of certain digital assets. This provides for a process for a blockchain relating to a digital asset to be certified as decentralized. So this is going to be a section that permits any person to certify to the SEC that the blockchain network meets the requirements of the Act. So this would be meeting that definition of decentralized network we talked about. The SEC is then provided an opportunity to rebut the assertion that the network meets the decentralization test, and they have to give, good detail about why they think it doesn't meet that definition of decentralized network. Then we've got Section 301, treatment of digital commodities and other digital assets. So Section 301 excludes digital commodities and stable coins, which they're calling payment stable coins, from the definition of a security under the security laws. So obviously, this is sort of the crux of the whole thing. If you are a digital commodity, you are not a security under the securities laws. This section aligns the definition. We don't need to go through that part, but this is going to be the most important thing. Everybody is going to want to be a digital commodity because there's an exemption from the definition of security under the securities laws. Then we've got Section 401. So Section 401 sets out the new authority of the CFTC over certain transactions in digital assets. Specifically, the section provides the Commission with new exclusive regulatory jurisdiction over digital commodity cash or spot markets. So all the exchanges are going to want to be over here, not in the SEC world. Digital cash or spot markets, which occur on or with the new which occur on or with CFTC, the new registered entities created in this act, digital commodity exchanges, digital commodity dealers, and digital commodity brokers. So they're saying, hey, we're going to create some new different types of entities: digital commodity exchanges, digital commodity brokers, and digital commodity dealers, and digital commodity brokers. So obviously, anybody who's any kind of intermediary in crypto, they're going to want to fall under these definitions. They're not going to want to be in the SEC world. This new authority complements the Commission's existing anti-fraud and anti-manipulation authority over all cash or spot market commodity transactions, including cash or spot market transactions in digital assets. Section 401 provides the Commission with authority over transactions with or involving payment stablecoins that occur on or with a CFTC registered entity, as a payment stablecoin is a digital commodity. The CFTC shall have no authority over the design, structure, or operation of such payment stablecoins. So we don't know if this bill will ever pass. I mean, I assume it's going to get introduced at some point, but what I hope is that whatever bill eventually does pass, we don't know when that's going to happen or what it's going to look like, but I hope some of the definitions look similar to this. Is this bill perfect? No. Can you find problems with this bill? Yes, and people have already done it. But overall, I think the direction of this bill is pretty good because what does it demand? It demands that a network is functional and that the network be decentralized, both in terms of who can change the protocol, who can censor people on the protocol, and ownership of the asset related to that blockchain. These are all good things. This is the way crypto people would write a bill like this in some regards. And it sort of divides the world up predictably into commodities and securities. And as long as you're, largely, if you're a decentralized network and a functional network, you can fit, and, you got to make some disclosures and some things like that, but you can largely fit into the commodities side of the world. This is a great bill. Do we know, is this what it's going to be? We don't know, but it's great to see a bill like this introduced. I think this is a great direction for, sort of like the development of a US regulatory framework. So I think this is a burst of bright light in an otherwise kind of bleak week for crypto. And I think that Cardano can pretty easily fit into this kind of framework, but a lot of those VC coins, they're going to have a really tough time. They're going to have to change and morph drastically to fit some of these requirements. And I don't think we're going to see another big boom of VC coins because at least in the way we have in the past, because that sort of structure doesn't fit the decentralization requirements of that the sponsors, at least of this bill, are looking for. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.